Welcome to the next episode of the Iowa Girls Wrestling Stories podcast. I have probably one of the most influential people in my coaching career, or at least recent coaching career, on today, Emma Randall, who happens to be the head wrestling coach for Columbia University. She's also the head coach for women at the New York City RTC. She's worked for Beat the Streets New York. When I met her, was a development coach for USA Wrestling. She's also the founder of An Ever Evolving Story. And in my opinion, in my experience, she's probably one of the best coaches, male, female, that I've ever been around. And I've learned so much from her. So, please welcome Emma Randall to our conversation today. How you doing, Emma?
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you for that super kind introduction as well.
Well,
I love getting to chat with you and connect and share our stories. So I'm looking forward to this.
yeah, I actually want to start with where I met you and started kind of this whole thing because when I met you, I had just started with girls wrestling. I had taken Keegan, I was the first girl I coached, took her to that meet at Carver Hawkeye, and then the Schuster family invited me down to Lincoln to go to this clinic, and I was like, well, that's not. I just had an incredible experience because I never knew even girls wrestling was that big, and for the time, now we look at it and we look back and say how small it was. But then I gotta meet you at this clinic where I saw some different things. I saw games being used as a tool and redefining success. Could you talk to maybe everybody a little bit about how you use some of those tools with the youth and even the college girls?
Yeah, I think wrestling's a hard sport, and we kind of overlean into the challenge and use the sport as a deterrent more so than like a welcoming space for young faces and new faces, and even just like keeping it fun for those to stick with the sport year after year. And so that was an interesting clinic. It was like K through 12, and it might have even been some kids that were younger, all in one space, cohabiting and training alongside each other. And we had the groups kind of split up. And so we were kind of juggling back and forth between the age groups as clinicians and trying to figure out what's the best way to build this room. And I think it's definitely something that we talk about a lot within the coaching education realm. Is like, how do you make learning fun? How do you make it accessible? How do you create games that can kind of naturally help your student athletes pick up a skill without you having to teach step by step technique and making it a little bit more fluid, but also like building that in and making it a piece of confidence from them. And so games have always been a big part of the coaching realm and education pieces that I've studied. And it's fun to just kind of apply those things and see like everyone still enjoys a reason to laugh during practice. Everyone wants a moment to be competitive. Our sport is competitive. So why not lean into it in a joyful way and work on competing and being a respectful competitor and a sports person, in the various forms, both as like a wrestler, but also in the multitude of games and ways that we challenge ourselves.
Yeah. One of the other things that I really picked up at that clinic and it was redefining success. Sometimes you had talked about how even at the highest level, you don't necessarily talk about wins and losses. You talk about getting better. That comes out of my mouth a lot, but let me hear it come out. Let me hear it come out of somebody's mouth that's a little higher up in the food chain than myself.
Yeah, well, I think like there's so many things that go into an ultimate win or loss that, as much as we feel as if we're in control, we're really just contributing to the outcome. And so I could do everything right and still have factors in which maybe I'm mismatched with my opponent's strength or my opponent's technique and experience. Maybe, I'm not feeling my best that day. So really what we're looking for is like, how are you improving each match? What are the tactics going into that start of the match that we talk about wanting to execute within our game plan? Maybe it's as simple as like getting to our control ties and finding our offense, or maybe it's maintaining head position and controlling their attack hand for the full 6 minutes. Whatever it may be, right? Like, what are your things? And then as we're exiting that match, are we really like, were we able to do what we practiced? Were we able to do what we talked about? And so that can be a big piece of defining what is our success and what are the areas that we have opportunities to continue to get better in. It can also expand outside of the match. Um, to your warm up, your cool down, your mindset, your ability to sleep, your refuel and rehydration plan post weigh-ins. You can get super technical with your match stats. I try and just like let our women grade themselves on a scale of 1 to 10. How well did we do as far as like preparation with sleep? How did our mindset feel? Were we feeling confident? Like just kind of checking those boxes so they're looking back at a larger scope, because competition happens in 6 minutes, but there's a lot of things within that 12, 48, 72 hour window leading up to that can impact our outcome as well. And then after the tournament, going back and looking at the match stats, how many shots did we take? How many times were we in our control ties? Were we able to finish those shots? When we got to our control ties, were we able to like make an actual attempt with them? How many times did we get pushed out? Was there a drop in our scoring at a certain time within the match consistently? Like, hey, during the fourth and fifth and 6 minute of the match, I'm exhausted. You're not scoring points. It's probably because you're not in shape. So trying to
Mhm.
come and unpack those things in different ways. So it's not necessarily was your hand raised, but it's what are the important pieces of growth that we're really looking for from this match, and whatever your rating scale may be, whatever those 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 items are, like, are you looking for ways that you succeeded? Are you looking for ways that you can improve your process and improve your performance long term?
Wow, that's really, I mean, it's amazing how in depth, the sport really gets, as a high school coach, and I have about hour and a half, 2 hours a day with them and work another job and come work, I wish I had the time to dive deep into something like that. It would be awesome because I would really love to see where we're at on those things. And maybe it's something I just need to do a better job at, and find some time to work on that. Obviously it's time consuming.
It's a huge time commitment, and I think the thing to think about is like when you look at other sports, they all have software that's tracking those data points for them. They're tracking where were the shots going up, where were the shots that were made on a basketball field, how many times did we run, how many yards did we gain per carry, how many times did we throw the ball, right? Those stats can exist, and so I think that's a challenge to find like the correct data and software. What data are you looking for, and what software is collecting that stuff? I think an interesting thing to do, and we have a pre-match competition worksheet where the girls are putting in their own goals for themselves, and so that's helpful. Like, it's written down, and then after the competition, they have a post reflection, and so that's really falling on the athlete to have that reflection, and then it's coming to me to watch film together, and we're reflecting pre and post what things worked out, what things didn't, because just like you're saying, there's only so many hours in a day, right? And
Yeah.
I think for some of our like higher performance women, or maybe like our people who are like competing for world team and national team spots, we're really like digging in on what are the data points and what are the feedback. And then some of the people that are a little bit more recreational based are still growing and learning. I think empowering them with those tactics and skills to evaluate themselves is super helpful as well, because now you're not spending a ton of time watching their film, but you're doing a lot of time sitting next to them and saying, like, that's a really good idea. I love the way that you set that goal for yourself to stay after practice and work on your conditioning, or to get, to work on this focus area, whatever that may be for them. And then I think, too, while you're watching film with them, you could be taking stats or having them write the stats as we're going through it. Like, how many shots is that now? How many times have you gotten to that 2-on-1 or that underhook right now during this time? And so, again, it is a time thing, but it's also like, what things can I put on that student athlete um, to kind of like take some of the load off of me, but really it's empowering to them, because now they're understanding what I'm looking for in film. What do I see as successful? It's not so much of like, man, I didn't do so hot this tournament, I hope coach isn't mad at me. Like, no, I'm taking
Yeah.
accountability for the things that I need to learn and control. And I know exactly what coach is looking for. And would I give myself an A, B, C, or D performance, based off of all those factors and micro process goals along the way. It comes down to just a little bit of everything. So what is that overall summary for the student athlete?
Yeah. No, I gotta bring something down here real quick. Yeah. And now, Jason Shepard was along with me the last time, we were there, and we've coined a little phrase in our room now, and it's what would Emma Randall do? So, so one of the things that I noticed, again, I'm going to go back to that second clinic. This was the Allison Schuster Memorial one. We won't get into the details behind that. We don't need to be upset today, but one of the things that I saw, and I really enjoyed this, is for every every movement you had a drill for it. It seemed like, hey, we had a sticking point, we had a drill. And then later that night when we were talking, that came from your experience with Beat the Streets. Uh, would you like to explain a little bit about, I mean, you went into depth that night after talking about, going into the different boroughs and all the different things you had to do. I'd really like to hear more about the Beat the Streets experience and how that affected the way you coach.
Yeah, I mean, um, when I first started coaching, I was dumped into the Olympic Training Center with people with way more accolades than I could ever, have as a student athlete myself, and with coaches with amazing resumes and track records of working with great people. And so I got to learn from the best and the brightest for sure. But at the same time, I'm not giving like huge life-changing advice. It's slightly different of like, here, you got to get higher quicker. You got to get that trail leg up. You got to explode. Hey, you need to control that attack hand a little bit more. But, I'm teaching very basic skills and with zero experience at Beat the Streets. And so that was a challenge. And it was figuring out like, what are the things that I need to do to make learning easier, happen quicker? Because, as coach, the longer that athlete sits there and does the move and doesn't feel like they're executing it right, they're getting frustrated. They're starting to talk negatively to themselves. They're starting to question whether I belong in this sport. They're starting to question you. They're as like the coach, and so
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to let someone struggle, but I also don't think it needs to be so laborious all the time. I think we got to find ways to help our student athletes win. And so by chunking the larger skill down into these smaller pieces and layering games and drills back and forth to scaffold this overall lesson, that by the time they piece it together, they've got, whether it's a chain movement, set up, takedown to turn, or maybe it's just like understanding three different finishes based off your opponent's reaction from a single leg entry, like just understanding those pieces. But those things kind of layer on top of each other and scaffold to provide success. And some of that may be like by just doing drills that are really small movements, whether it's eliminating using our hands so that we have to work on our hip position. Maybe it's by my head has to stay in contact, which means my feet have to continue to move the entire time. Maybe I'm holding a piece of paper underneath elbow. So I'm pinching my arms in so I'm not getting too overextended and reaching in the hand fight, whatever it may be, as far as like creating a manipulation or changing the space or saying you got to get to this target over here when you finish your double so that we're making sure our women are getting up to their feet and running and covering distances. But there's a lot of different things that you can do that force you to step outside of your comfort zone. And I think not only is it helpful for the student athletes to build success, but now we're focusing on those little mini details within the technique. There's always what are my head, hands, hips, my feet doing in any kind of motion? What's my direction? What's my pressure look like or feel like? And helping them understand those things. And so by chunking it, you kind of get a little bit greater sense of what each detail is doing so that when we do pile them together, it's a pretty fluid motion. And it's fun. Like when I have our women run practices, it's fun to see them choose to do the same scaffolding drills and skills in which, I would have put them through, or watching them create a new one themselves. And it's fun going to different countries or programs and watching the warm-ups, the practices, the drills that they're doing, watching online, but like taking all of those things and like, how can I apply that to my room? Oh, wow, I really love the way that person's feet were moving. I love the outside step. Like, I think that's a great agility drill that we can add to our warm-ups. And the women can't even really think that they're doing the outside step, but next thing you know, they're getting quicker at getting their hips in. And so it's fun. I think it's a challenge as like a coach to think of new and inventive ways and to think about like what's the best way for my student athlete to learn, as opposed to like what's the easiest thing for me to say or execute or do. It's really not about me. It's about like how do I give them the tools to really build their own house.
Yeah. And like, uh, that's amazing stuff. And it's really for a coach, I just love sitting and listening to you because I see all the things that I can improve on myself. That's something really important. Um, New York City, different challenges than a lot of places, correct? I know I've heard other
Yes.
interviews that you've given. I'm in Iowa. We got wrestling rooms, everybody's got a wrestling room. Some schools have two or three wrestling rooms. We have, we're talking about, I've been in schools that have three mat wrestling rooms that have all kinds of, I was in one room, three mats, I think they had 5 TVs on the wall to review film during practice.
Wow.
Just, and this is a high school. And then I've been in the Grandview room. I don't know if it had 4 full mats,
Mhm.
just amazing. What's some of the differences in New York City compared to, like, we'll just say Iowa? And I know you're from Ohio, another big wrestling state, and you wrestled
Yep.
in Pennsylvania. So, I mean, what are some
Yeah, I didn't
differences?
realize that we were living a luxurious life with wrestling rooms, right? Like I think we've taken them for granted our entire lives. There could be teams that are practicing with 4 mat strips and they've got 40 people. There could be no designated mat space, and so it's whatever they can fit as far as strips in a closet or behind the bleachers, and that's where they're going to roll it out in the cafeteria or um, in the gym, or maybe it's even just an empty hallway. No real weight rooms for the student athletes, and so it's whatever the school has. It could be some random dumbbells and some plates. It could be just, hey, like you got to put stuff in your backpack and weigh it down. I've got some books over here. I got a couple jugs of water. Like let's make this work with whatever we've got. And I think the pandemic was helpful too because I think it eliminated some of those extra resources that we all took for granted. It kind of leveled the playing field as far as you need to be creative of how you're going to get this workout in, and it's a challenge for the city. Space is limited here in New York, and um, it's always going to be that way. That's just the place in which we
Yeah.
live. And so I think we do a really good job of coming up with ways to utilize our space to create small, lightweight things that, can double up in uses, or maybe, hey, let's be creative about the way that we're adding weights and making this a challenge for our student athletes. I think New York is known for like, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. Um, and so we lean into that kind of like grittiness. I don't need the best. I'm just here to fight. I'm here to be the best that I can be, and I'm willing to take on anyone. And I think that's something that's really cool. I would say that I've probably been to like 6 to 8 wrestling rooms in the entire New York City population itself. And I've been to a lot of high schools, a lot of colleges, a lot of rec centers.
Uh-huh.
And so when you do see something, you really value it and appreciate what you have. It doesn't seem like much, but I had the same wrestling room from youth wrestling all the way up through high school, and like what a joy that was to like have a place that held memories versus like this is a smashed tater tot that I'm wrestling next to on the edge of this mat.
Yeah, there you go.
They do a good job cleaning up, so it's not like that, but it's
I
just
know what you're
like
saying.
shared space and shared memories versus this is your own thing. um, and I think even just having that safe space that you can call your own was important for me. Of like this was home, whether I was in college or high school or at the training center. But um, yeah, it's hard for those student athletes to like what is their home. That team is a huge source of community for them, but not having a home base is hard.
Yeah. So I just heard you mention something about having a home, and you've always had a home base and stuff. Why don't we go back to early days of you wrestling in Ohio? Was that, I'm guessing that was co-ed at the time, I'm sure. And why don't you talk about how you got into wrestling and where it went from there?
Yeah, I actually just got a message from my hometown peeps today. They had like 50 women in their wrestling room, which is
Oh,
amazing.
wow.
When I started, it was basically a boys program that they allowed to be co-ed, thankfully. I grew up in a really small rural area with some great guys who, were challenging my parents about why I couldn't get on the mat with my brothers. And I'd spent almost a year sitting on the sidelines 3 to 4 days a week watching him wrestle, wondering when I would get the chance. And I started shadow wrestling on the side. Then I started joining in the practices, but not competing. And then by third grade, I got to jump in and wrestle in state. I got spladled in the finals, stuff. Yeah, I wrestled
You'll
up
have
through
to,
junior high and high school, and it was a good experience. Once I hit like 119 pounds, my parents were definitely questioning whether it was the best move for me. And so I was always a multi-sport athlete, but I started just like training and wrestling and not competing until I would wrestle in all women's tournaments. And so I kind of made that shift of jumping out of the high school realm because I didn't want to wrestle 145-pound guys.
yeah, no, I understand
That
that.
that changes the narrative, right? Of like what's
Yeah.
safe and appropriate. And so I was jumping in with the guys when I could, playing other sports, and then continue to wrestle through college. But my hometown people have always been like great supports. They've definitely challenged me, and I think I've challenged them as far as like how do you handle a female in the room. It was brand new territory for them as well, so I
Yeah.
think their intentions were good,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
trying to make things as smooth as possible and as welcoming as possible. And because we had the K through 12 program, being able to age up with people as opposed to walking into a room and being brand new, I think also helped. And it was a great opportunity.
Yeah. So would have that been the all girls meets? Would that have been USGWA?
Yeah, yeah, that
Yeah.
was the hot days of USGWA. I
Yeah.
wrestled a girl from Michigan every year in the Ohio State Championships because that's how small the tournaments were. They're like,
Yeah.
you can get here, you can wrestle.
Yeah. I I hear you a lot about it. I know Kent Ballow. I've talked had a phone
Mhm.
conversation with Kent Ballow before. Very fun guy to talk to. But I talked around here. Paige Storm. I don't know if you know Paige or not. Coach at BV University. She wrestled in the USGWA, and I've heard all the stories and things like that. So it's really cool that existed 20 years ago. That
Yeah,
and
it's
it but
unbelievable,
that's
honestly.
yeah, really. And it took us this long to really get the sport sanctioned, and it's kind of I don't know what happened. I don't know where that disconnect was. I'm glad it happened eventually, but I know there was a
Mhm.
disconnect. I know you went to Lock Haven to wrestle, and would have that been one of the first female programs? I know like Missouri Valley had one. Cumberland's were they that was some of the first ones.
Yeah, yeah, Minnesota Morris.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a few of like the originals. Lock Haven did not have a women's program in the early 2000s. So Sarah McMahon, Ginny Wong, Katie Downing, Aaron Vandiver, who formerly Tomio, they all were at the Haven and they were on the guys team. So my
Oh,
academic
okay.
advisor, while I was still there, was actually the head coach of the men's team during that time and was welcoming the women into the room and helping take care of them. So it was cool to have like a piece of that history every day, in class, but also helping me kind of manage my future and line up my career. When I got there, there was a club and there was about 15 to 20 women. A lot of them crossed over with our rugby friends and would play, based on the season, which team they were competing for.
Hmm.
We weren't a part of the WCWA. We were closer to Canada, so we would just go up to Canada at least once a month to go compete. Um, back then as well, Canada was ahead of the US as far as women's wrestling. Their performances on the world and Olympic stages were by far outdoing us. And so it was a cool experience. My college coach was a wonderful guy, Terry Fike. Got a lot of Terrys in my life.
You do, yeah.
But yeah, he was very much like a deep thinker, process oriented, just really wanted to see us as humans grow and like see the sport grow. And he had big dreams of creating a PSAC, which is like the state schools of Pennsylvania, an athletic conference, and getting that going because it was within driving distance and we could renovate and change the world and allow all these women to wrestle. And like he was so ahead of his time as far as like what's the way to like be a humanistic coach who gets the most out of their student athletes while also like being able to look at that macro scale of like how do we make women's wrestling accessible because the want is there. However, like the welcome mat hasn't been rolled out and matter of fact, we didn't even mail out invites or save the dates. Like we're just like, if you know us, then you can find us. But if you don't know where to look, then it's okay. We don't need you here either, which is crazy.
Yeah.
When we should have
Yeah.
been like welcoming and pulling people in, we weren't.
Yeah, it is amazing, and it's awesome that you've had some coaches in your lifetime that were ahead of their time for that. I know that in Iowa, I as soon as I started coaching the girls, I noticed the difference right away. It was something that, you know, girls tend to pay attention better in practice, but that's not even it. That's not it. It wasn't even how they picked up on things. It was, it's kind of the emotion behind the sport. It's kind of the relationship building that it seems like the female side of the sport has more than the male side. And I, as a male coach and everything, I think people kind of looked at me kind of odd, and I was a little bit older coaching a lot of younger girls and stuff. And they'd always ask me, what are you doing that? And man, you just got to try it. And now all these guys are coaching the girls, they've switched over and they won't
Mhm.
go back. It's such a fun it's such a fun and a refreshing way to coach, you know. And I'm not saying I don't have frustrations, you know, on my team, and it's not all rainbows and unicorns and stuff. But man, it is just refreshing sometimes to talk about relationships. And I think that's something I got in those first couple of clinics with you. You know, it is a little bit about relationship building and things like that, more so than the guys. You know, I've been at guys' clinics where we'll take a lunch break and they're all sitting against the wall on their phone and the girls are having a, you know, the girls are
Mhm.
talking and having fun and just a different environment. Has it, I don't even know where my question's at there. I don't know. I get more of a statement there. I do remember, I think at that first clinic, you said that you kind of got burnt out on wrestling and at Lock Haven and maybe even
Sure.
thought about stepping away from the sport prior to maybe talk a little bit about you know, the burnout because it's real. The burnout is real. And then what brought you back in to the sport of wrestling? That we're
Yeah.
grateful you came back.
Well, thank you. I'm glad I came back too. It's worked out in my favor for sure, and it's been a fun ride. I was at Lock Haven. I started at 79 kilos my freshman year. Got down to 72, and then I thought 67 would be a better weight class with Stephanie Lee, Ira Smith, uh, Allie Bernard, and Adeline, and others up at 72. And so I wanted to come down to 67, which is like a stretch for my body type. I'm almost 6 feet tall. And so to cut down to 67 kilos, it's 147.5. My life centered around managing my weight, what I could eat, when I could eat. Another huge thing that was weighing on me was just like I'd always struggled with it. But it was like becoming more and more aggressive and intensive as far as like the impact it was playing in my mental well-being. But competition anxiety, there's two real like major sources of competition anxiety. Mine was cognitive. It's probably what almost all of us experience, but probably don't have label. And so it would start, a month before the tournament, and I would be thinking about like, man, I've got to have a good result so I can climb the rankings, so that I can qualify for this, so that I can show my team why I'm a leader, and the value of my wrestling, but also the value of me as a human was tied to a lot of the outcomes. And so not only was like the weight management controlling almost every aspect of my day, but so was these like negative thoughts of like what ifs, and a lot of them weren't rooted in reality. And I started studying sports psychology at Lock Haven because I recognized in
Uh-huh.
myself what we were talking about in class, and that drew me into uh, you know a whole realm of like self discovery, but also just like things that are super helpful for human development, but also in my coaching role today. But yeah, I really struggled, and I have to think again. My college coach had me write a letter to my parents to like explain my feelings of like what I was perceiving they thought I needed to do to be worthy of their love, or of like their acceptance, or that college was a positive thing. Um, I would sit with him for hours, and we would redefine success. We would talk about the meaning of love, and the meaning of like being all in and taking risks, and what do those things look like. We would watch interviews of coaches and athletes talking about those kinds of things. I was in my classes feverishly taking notes, not only because I'm a nerdy person, but also because I was like, this has to be the key. But yeah, I mean, I really worked on myself and tried to figure it out, and I couldn't. I remember like after my last US Open, that was like the year of the Olympic trials. And then U23 nationals that year too. I was like, I'm so done. I was just like needed to be out of the sport. And I had lined up an internship already at that time with the New York Athletic Club. That was falling through. And so I was meeting with my advisor, Carl Poff, who was the former head coach at Lock Haven on the men's team, almost like weekly to figure out what I was going to do. And that's when Terry welcomed me to the Olympic Training Center with USA Wrestling, and Mitch Hall was a big piece of that too. They didn't know what I was going to do, but they would let me in, and I would shadow Terry and handle any administrative stuff the summer of the London Olympics. And so, yeah, that's kind of like what pulled me back in. And Terry was like, well, if you're here, you might as well like be on the mat. And if you're here, you might as well like see what we can do. And so it just kept throwing me into more and more things, as a, just as a training partner, and just as like a coach as well. But he would challenge me in different ways to show up and show out. And without competition, I began to love wrestling again, as I learned more about coaching. And I'd studied coaching, but having the confidence to say something to a senior national team member or a world medalist, it takes a lot, and so working on that confidence with Terry and also Mike Clayton, it was helpful. It was a big piece of my journey, and it just slowly sucked me in. And I think, similar to everything, we go through times of like love hate relationships where something becomes too much of your identity, or something becomes, a really big draw and causes a lot of sacrifice. And you have to sit back and like think about, is this something that I really want to continue to make that sacrifice? Is it worth it? And I think keep coming back, and I'm sure you have the same thing because you're sitting here today too, but we
Yep.
keep getting drawn back in. There's something about the sport, there's something about the role of coaching that's like so special and powerful, and the community that we surround ourselves with, that makes it worth us, the return.
Yeah, some of the things you said there, I know I've heard them from you in our conversations and stuff. Just so you know, in our room we define our room as family, and a lot of teams use family, but we use the word, we break it down to forget about me, I love you. But I
uh,
figure as male coaches in a high school room full of girls, we need to explain love, and I'm so happy you said that,
uh-huh.
because I explain love as I am going to give of myself to you without expecting anything back. And if we're a family and we all love each other, you'll give of yourselves to your teammates, and we'll build each other up instead of putting each other down. That's kind
That's
of the
so cool.
basis. That's the basis of our room and stuff. So I know I've heard these things come out of your mouth, and I don't think any coaching anymore is original. I think we're all hearing it from people
Yeah, we're
prior to
trickling.
us, and
Yeah.
which is great. But I've and the word confidence. Confidence is a big thing in our room too, because as we see girls gain confidence, then the winning starts, and but not just winning on the mat. They'll start being confident at their jobs. They'll be confident at this. Will be,
Mhm.
confident in school and stuff. So yeah, I love hearing those things from you, because I know I heard them from you, and I wanted you more so. I wanted you to know that you were heard and that we're using those things. Um,
Oh, well, I appreciate that. I think it's
yeah.
so cool. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so grateful that you create such a safe space and welcoming space for your team. That's
Yeah,
cool.
I've also heard you say, and I think it was on a different podcast with my friend Kelby Bachman. I believe he had talked about being a male coach in a women's in a women's sport and stuff. And you said something about being placeholder, and I talk about that also with our girls, and I want to talk a little bit about this. Um, Being a placeholder for, because I know that next generation of girls is coming out of college, and I'm so excited for that, because it's really hard for my girls to see themselves in this bald, guy with a beard, kind of getting big old belly on him. So it's hard for them to see themselves in me, but they can see themselves in you, and they can see themselves in some of the girls that we've coached prior that are coming back. Um, and officials. We just did an officials clinic with Nadine. I don't know if you've ever met Nadine Johnson or not throughout your travels, but she lives in Colorado, and she came back and did a officials clinic, and we certified 6 female officials, college and high school girls at our youth tournament and stuff. So what are your thoughts on how do we get more girls? How do we get more women involved? How do we get more moms to do what the dads do? Because I know a lot of them sit in the corner and have no idea what they're talking about. So, how do we get more female coaches and officials and all that? How do we give them the tools?
Yeah, I think, it's $1 million question, really. I think some of it comes down to just like being inviting, and encouraging and staying with people like, hey, I'd really love your help with this. Hey, we'd love to see you here, and opening that door for them. Because I think a lot of times when you put out a sign for volunteers, it's indirect exactly who that's to. And so that we fall back into those connotations of like, who should be volunteering as a coach, who should be sitting in the corner. And so making sure that like physical invitation is out there. I think, it's planting the seed, and watching it grow, and being patient. It's going to take time. Um, Terry likes to talk about planting the bamboo and how the roots grow horizontally instead of like having a shoot coming up. And so welcoming those parents and at the beginning of the school year, to come in and watch practice, inviting them to sit in the room and join a practice, experience the sport. Maybe you're going through the bronze certification or silver certification stuff and inviting them to hop on and listen to what you're learning. I think it's like for myself to gain that confidence, a lot of it was just wanting to feel like I had credentials. And so, making those resources available for the women. And again, that might take time too. They might not want to coach right away. They want to go through that certification process. They want to shadow for a year. Maybe they don't have a huge time commitment that they can offer. And so is it saying like, hey, if you could just come one day a week instead of 5 days, or we'd love to have you whatever day you can come, or is it providing the extra childcare of like, hey, you can bring your kid here. That's a padded room.
Yeah, yeah.
Like this is a great way to bring them in. And so I think that kind of method of like creating that community, that welcoming space, those resources to feel welcome and credentialed enough to be there. And I think that's like just also with the guys that are around too, like encouraging those dads who are ready to volunteer. Like, hey, you've been a volunteer for a year. We'd love you to get bronze certified, and our club's willing to pay this year, to help them kind of gain that information as well, and incentivizing them and making it normal so that it's not just the women who are seeking out those certifications and feeling like they're stepping outside of their comfort zone. And then I think it starts with us, or it continues with us, just like continuing to plant the seed right now. Is there anyone in our team who wants to coach? Okay, like let's have you run the warm-ups every Monday. Let's have you, you're about to graduate, so I want you to mentor this person to be our competition captain. She's going to put us through the warm-up, and you're going to critique and give feedback on her volume, on her energy, those kinds of things. This person's going to help out with passing this institutional knowledge down, or hey, let's all take a officiating class together so we can learn the rules, and refresh ourselves, but also let's get credentialed and help out with our youth club. But like planting those seeds of like you belong here and you can do those roles, and then providing experiences to do them, or experiences to learn more about those various roles, and opportunities to practice them. Those job shadow opportunities, those mini internships, most of the time we end up digging into that field more, and so we can steal something from the career and education world and implement it within our sport.
Yeah. And now you talked about certification. Just so everybody knows, you're one of 80 people. Is it still that in the United States that's gold certified? That
I have no idea what the total
I,
is these days.
I believe that's what it is. But man, that's a heck of a commitment. I've done the bronze because you need to have bronze to be able to, cross state lines and things like that. But even just the silver is quite a commitment. How many hours of commitment time do you have to put into that? It's amazing what you have to do, but it's great. I've looked at the silver during the pandemic. I looked at the
Mhm.
silver because I had some extra time on my hands. But what are some of the things you have to do in order to become certified that at that level?
Yeah, I think it definitely was a huge time thing. I did it the same time I was in grad school, so some of the stuff I feel like I just was like I already was in homework mode, and
Uh-huh.
so I was able to bring some stuff out. But there's the book reports, there's recording your practices and submitting a plan and practice to be reviewed. Doing research and presenting on a topic, helping lead a coach's clinic, going overseas and being a part of Team USA. Lots of just like different readings and applications of like what did you read and how did you pull that and apply it to coaching, and what things can you take from other sports industries. And it was honestly like really good. uh, Instead of talking a lot about like the technical aspects of wrestling, it talks a lot about like the methodology of coaching. Like how do you best serve your student athletes, how does your leadership impact your team's performance and culture. um, how do you build rapport with a student athlete? How do you focus on like creating a practice plan that has some sort of community builder or some sort of relationship building piece to it, and like how do you add pressure, but withdraw it so that you're not overtaxing or injuring or burning out your student athletes. But all of those things are essential. I think there's so much technique online, but when you really look at it, how many coaches are really seeking out opportunities to learn about how to improve their method of applying that knowledge? The techniques and tactics are super helpful, and I think like we're in a never-ending um, role in which we're constantly learning and evolving as coaches. I think we're all imperfect and hoping to strive to be our best self, but um, how do we really like take those things and apply them and make the experience focused on that student athlete and the best positive experience that keeps them coming back, that helps them uh, reach their goals and their potential as wrestlers, but also as humans. And that's what's like cool and powerful to me. Like it's great to win and it's cool to see those things, but it's cool when somebody was at 280 pounds less than a year ago and now they're down to 207 and are able to compete. It's cool to watch someone do their first forward roll, or when they come to you after borrowing wrestling shoes for 8 months and they finally bought their first pair because they're staying, like having them win their first match with their parents there, or it's just like there's so many cool things, watching them graduate and take on new jobs, watching them mentor other student athletes or help out at camps and clinics. And I think that stuff's really powerful and it's cool. And undervalued. Like I love to win too, but I love to see our students succeed and turn into wonderful people.
Yeah, that's some of the stuff that I absolutely love this. I love coaching for more so than any victories or anything like that. It just those little tiny things. I think, as an older guy, I coached since I think 1999, and I
Wow.
have cried more
Well, thank you.
and I have cried in the last it's been about 10 years of coaching girls. Man, there's not probably a tournament that goes by that I don't tear up at some point in time because I'm so proud of what they're doing, or you just start talking about it with somebody else and I'll tear up with them, or I'll get a phone call from one of the girls. I try to keep in touch with a lot of them that are in college because I know how hard that is. I know I needed somebody to call me at that time, and we'll talk about how things are going, and those are the really special things, more so than any state championship or any of that stuff. It's just those are really fun things. One of the things that Jason Shepard and I really enjoy watching is how the Columbia University club team, that first year especially, was really fun to watch because we would watch the online videos and it was exactly what you showed at the clinic that we were at and stuff. And then it's fun to see how has building that team been. I mean, and I got a few more questions on the whole Columbia thing, but how is it building that? That's got to be just a lot of work, but really rewarding.
Yeah, I think I love building. I found that out about myself. And that's like my favorite kind of role. And it's also a nice meld of high performance and development, recreation and like growing the sport, but also very much like how can we get people onto those age group and senior national teams and into that conversation of like making world and Olympic teams. And so it's a cool vibe of like mixing those two things and being able to build something from scratch, a whole new system, a whole new, um, just like pathway for our student athletes. And we have 25 now. We've averaged 25 to 30 every year. And so it's been really, really fun. We just graduated 9 last spring. So that was like, so sad because I spent 3 years with that group and this will be like our first 4-year class. Um, but yeah, I think like they're so smart and so kind and so fun and bubbly and inquisitive about the world and like ready to try anything, like so courageous, like to start a new sport at 18, 19, 20, 21, to start a sport that's combative, that violates gender norms, that's not one of the sports that's like, wow, that sounds really fun.
Yeah.
It's grueling and intensive. And so yeah, I'm like just amazed every day with like who they are, and learning from them and like seeing how they see the world. Um, that it's really cool, and it is of course a challenge. Like with a club, we have all the freedom and not much support. Whereas like a varsity team has an infrastructure behind it within that athletic department, and so it's also fun for me to wear the hats because I get to be creative, but it can be exhausting. I think the cool piece of the group that I'm with, like they see where I'm at and like, they check in. We have a weekly meeting with our executive board of like what's going on, who needs help with what. As I'm like piecing things together, I'm like, hey, I'm putting together next year's competition schedule. Are you more interested in doing this, or do you think we should do that with this amount of funds? And like sharing that decision making, delegating roles, and um, I think that's also cool too, because that's a piece of coaching that we also take for granted, and it's a life skill. You've got to learn how to budget. You've got to figure out and foreplan on those kinds of things. But um, like as you're stepping into coaching, you're thinking about those 90 minutes to 120 minutes of practice. You're not thinking about like the the communication side, the fundraising, the scheduling, the gear, the managing parents, recruiting, retaining, admissions pieces, all of those kinds of stuff. So it definitely helps to have like a team who's invested in supporting one another and opening the door and welcoming that next new face, whether they have experience or not, but also they're embracing all the different roles and sharing the load because it's heavy. It's heavy to start a program, and I'm grateful for them.
Yeah, I did not. So I told you I started coaching in about 1999. I didn't get my first head coaching position until the pandemic, and the I was going to coach the girls where I'm at now, but the head coach left, and so did the AD at the same time. I happened to know the superintendent, so I called him and I said, "Hey, you remember I'm coming over, right?" Because I didn't want that,
Uh-huh.
confusion and stuff. And he said, "Well, let me tell you, I need a head coach." I'm like, I really don't want to coach the boys, but I'll do it. So that was my first jump into that too. And you're right. I wish there was more coaching education because I didn't know the first tournament we went to, I didn't even have my team entered into track wrestling properly. Thank God they helped me out. I didn't know anything about scheduling and all this stuff. 4 years later, I'm now a mentor
Mhm.
for girls wrestling in Northwest Iowa. So people are calling me on these same questions when they're just starting to be a head coach. So I think there needs to be more education for coaching.
Yeah,
We'll
for
get into
sure.
that because I think you have something for us. But so, I would almost say your Columbia University is similar to us high school coaches in recruiting wise. And since we're just sanctioned Iowa 2 years ago. This is our third year of sanctioned wrestling. So
Mhm.
we're getting a lot of brand new people on the mat every year and stuff. Uh, Absolutely loved watching the build of that. Do you ever see the Ivy Leagues, Columbia, becoming that next D1 area? I keep seeing that divide. I'm an NAIA person. I
Mhm.
went to a small NAIA school. I've helped a lot of the NAIA schools in Iowa, Grandview. I have a great working relationship with them. The D3 schools are really, I feel, at a big disadvantage. There's no scholarship available
Mhm.
anywhere. I mean, they're there because they want to do that and stuff. So, do you see the Ivy League, the Columbias, the all those maybe the next step?
Yeah, I think the Ivy, it's growing. Almost all of our schools that have wrestling have added a women's wrestling club. 5 out of the 7 have women's wrestling clubs. Yale and Penn do not. Columbia is in a good place. I'm pretty confident we'll be, working towards that varsity sooner rather than later. Um,
Nice.
and so I'm super excited. I think like every year we have quality candidates who are capable of getting into those Ivy League institutions, and it takes a significant student to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
qualified for that. Our average women's acceptance rate at Columbia of the women who are going through me to apply, it's like 20 to 30%, and the average rate is 3%. 60,000 people apply. It's rigorous and competitive. So
Yep.
the candidates are there. They're quality candidates. I think we're going to continue to see more of them. And as we advance to varsity, you'll see quite a few more opportunities. And I'm excited to see the growth of it. We had a meeting a couple of years ago with the Ivy League office and just shared a little bit about where we are and what the clubs are doing. We're working and fingers crossed because nothing's confirmed or
Oh
even
yeah.
like prelim laid out, but having some exhibition matches at the first ever Ivy League Wrestling Championship this year in March. And so other ways to continue to add those in. Last year, we hosted the first Ivy official duel. We dueled Harvard and Lehigh in the same day as our first home duels. Because fielding a team of 10 weight classes is really hard pulling
Yeah.
people in. as you know.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it was fun to win those. It was fun to win at home and show our athletic department. And I think our athletic directors are super kind and gracious and are supportive of our program. The NYC does a great job of providing equal opportunities to our women that our guys are receiving and supporting them in huge ways. There's not a lot of RTCs that have made that big plunge of like, I'm gonna, match what I'm doing on the men's side with the women and fill any gaps that we might not have. And so it's cool to have an ecosystem that's invested in the growth. And I think we'll see some big time programs here opening up in the near future. Um, and I hope that continues to create more opportunities for women, but also encourage other major institutions to pick it up. Right now, there's like 27 Division I clubs in
Yep.
the U.S. That Division I women's wrestling, the committee is kind of like managing and working of like helping them with bylaws, helping them make budgets, helping them fundraise, giving them advice on how to like work with key stakeholders and decision makers at their institution. And so it's been a cool thing to learn from Lori Ayres and Kira Berry and Jackie Davis on that committee and like how can we help these other programs and pull them up. Columbia was the first club to start and each time we have a meeting each month, it's like there's more people joining, more clubs are starting, more people are filing paperwork to start the club. And so I think those administrators are going to be like, wow, there's a lot of opportunity here to
Yeah.
to bring women in and be competitive right away.
Well, it's just been shown at the lower levels, at the NAIAs,
Mm-hmm.
at the D3, D2. Um, you know, I'm smart enough and I've been around long enough to know that it's a business, and it's a fairly inexpensive sport, and it puts butts in the seats, right? What's
Does
how
it
the
does.
NAIA, so that's one of the things I just keep waiting for it to go, build up more because it's exciting. You did say 27 clubs at the D1 level. Are they all wrestling freestyle? Because I know that the lower clubs are doing folk
Mm-hmm.
styles, or some are still doing folk style. What's
Yeah.
the mix there?
So we separate ourselves. The NWCA that manages like the folk style club wrestling for
Uh-huh.
colleges, they only do folk style. I wish that they would open their eyes to what's happening on the freestyle side for women and providing those opportunities for women within their clubs. Those are co-ed clubs, the majority of them. It just
Yeah.
depends whether that club happens to attend a tournament that has women there for their female partners and teammates to wrestle.
Okay.
The clubs that we work with are like actively seeking out freestyle opportunities, and that's who we're really like focusing our attention on because obviously there are other clubs, and there's a lot of smaller clubs too that are doing the folk style route. But since freestyle is what we're trying to focus on and trying to help those programs either create and establish some sort of sustainability, but also hopefully long term, help them kind of align themselves to a varsity vision.
Yeah. And well, when we're talking folk style, freestyle, New York State is kind of running they're kind of running a experiment, and I'm excited to see the results of that experiment, being part of the girls union and helping on that as far as on the advisory committee. We've talked about it, and just logistically, it just doesn't make sense at this point in time because we just don't have the
Yeah.
coaching knowledge. We barely have coaches, and now we have, to have freestyle coaches is a whole different
Mm-hmm.
different thing. We have when I started the first year, I believe the number was 122 high school referees in the state of Iowa, and that's why a lot of our stuff fell on Mondays and Fridays, and even our state tournament
Mm-hmm.
runs Thursday, Friday because the boys do their state duels on Saturday to have to have
Right.
the higher level officials to be able to do our state. Otherwise, anyway, I'm
Yeah,
excited. Have
I
you
think it
heard
is a joke.
anything? Have you heard anything out of the New York high schools since you're there? I mean, I haven't heard much yet. Are numbers good, or are they struggling with finding officials, coaches? What
Yeah.
have you heard? Because
Well, It's a little bit weird because New York operates a little bit differently. New York City is not under the control of the New York State High School
Oh,
Association. And
okay.
so living in New York City and beat the streets here, like is kind of like closer to my pulse. So I definitely know more about what's going on with them than what's going on upstate. But the numbers are up as far as how many women are on a roster. They put together a fall coaches series in which they were trying to empower coaches with more freestyle knowledge, how to cross over freestyle and folk style skills, like what are easy transitions that you can hit back and forth or teach so that you're not really like adding so much new things to the load. Um, and I know the last phone call that I was on, they were still trying to figure out what they were going to do about state and like how they were going to fit all the various mats and competition sessions and officials in during that time. So it'll be interesting to see what happens as they move into February for their state championship, whether they opt to move them to two separate events or one weekend and everyone squeezed in, or what they're going to do. But it is exciting. It's exciting to be part of a state that's kind of leading the pack with a freestyle championship. New York City has had a freestyle championship for over a decade that has been women specific, and it runs March to June. And so it was kind of cool to have like a folk style season and then also have a freestyle
Uh-huh.
season. I think we could take that model from cross country track and indoor and outdoor track, and we could have a fall Greco season, a winter folk style, and a spring freestyle if we really like got our ducks in a row and all committed to it. I don't know that there's ever a great time for the officials
You might be right.
for those to grow or the coaches to grow. I think you're right. It's a huge hole. Um, and similar to like the young women who were ahead of their time and maybe had more experience as these states were being sanctioned, and they maybe were missing out on higher quality matches by being forced into something. Um, as we're going through growing pains, I think it's the same kind of thing with like the officials
Yep.
and the coaches of like, oh, how do I manage two teams, or how do I, you know, split my staff on the weekends, but we train together during the week, or whatever it's going to be. But like, how do we make the most out of what we have? And that's kind of where we are. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think New York City opted to keep their girls season in the spring too. So I don't know what's going to happen with like the state championships and the numbers as far as that goes, but it would be really cool to continue to invest in this pipeline of development to the Olympics. You can see like the results that our women are having from being able to have that extra experience of freestyle. Not that I don't think folk style is a valuable asset to wrestling, but there are advantages to like learning and mastering one style versus two, and being conscious and aware and of the finer intricacies of and tactics of freestyle. And so I think we'll see who follows suit. Um,
Yep.
Now's the best time to make a change, though. Nothing is really like resolute as far as like our sport is can only do this. I think we kind of handcuff ourselves by saying our sport can't make changes. We could change anything we wanted about the sport to make it more accessible, more fun, more high scoring. And you see the rules committee changing the rules every year too.
Yep.
But I think it would be a cool opportunity for us all to switch. And yeah, maybe we struggle for a year, 2 years, 3 years, but I think we'll be amazed with what we find out about ourselves and what we're capable of doing.
Yeah, I know we're watching just to kind of see what's all going on, and I'll say the girls' union, and I'm just like I said, just on a committee. Uh, they do things right. I don't know if you've seen any of the stuff that's coming out of Iowa. 3,500 girls last year wrestling in the state, and standalone tournament, and we're working towards having team duels, dual state dual tournament also. It's been really cool. It's one of the things that comes up every year when we have our meetings is Iowa's an NFHS state, and there's not an NFHS rule set. We'll have to, that has to be figured out. There's
Uh-huh.
obviously things that need to be figured out, but it's something that is definitely being watched and looked at. You'd mentioned the RTC, which that's actually I got my little list, but I haven't really been following it. But wow, what a coaching staff! That's got to be just fun to be involved in that because I know Kendall Cross is there, Valentine's there. Who else is? I mean, you guys people pop in all the time, don't you? It just because where you're at, New York is.
Yeah, it's such a fluid city with people stopping over, competitions, training partners. It's been really cool to just kind of like tap into those resources. In the last month, Helen, Amit, and Kendall have been in the room with our women, and so to have three Olympic champions in a college room for the
Yeah.
women that we have, it's pretty impressive. Um, and so the RTC, we really were like in a growing phase leading up to the Olympic trials. We're resetting, as you know, our men's staff changed over, and so we kind of have a brand new men's staff, and we're rebuilding the stable. But we had a good fall this year for our Olympic Training Center. Well, I guess a good year. We had athletes competing in the Olympic trials. One of our Columbia student athletes was competing in it, Maya Latona. Amit goes on to win Olympic gold. Afto Kimchaze wins gold at the non-Olympic World Championships right after that. And so it's been it's been fun.
Yeah.
It's been exciting. To be a part of those things, and then to have the opportunity to learn from Kendall, to spend time with Valentine, just like whether it's sitting on a train or learning from their techniques. Same thing with like having Donnie Pritzloff, Jeff Buxton, Sebastian Rivera, and Greg Bolsack in the room. I think it's a really cool group. Of course, I miss Zach and his staff. I think they were awesome as well. But it's really fun. To show up and kind of like merge new ideas. And I think we're still, finding rhythm within each other, as like things turn over and you're thrust into the season. Now you're trying to still get to know someone.
Yeah.
But it's cool. Like our women are able to access, the high performance side with Kendall, the RTC, and the guys team Tuesdays and Thursdays in the morning, and they train with them. So we'll have 6 to 8 women in the room. Our higher level women who are trying to be age group, All Americans, national team members, world team members, and placers. So to be able to like have a staff that immediately is welcoming and encouraging to those women, and while doing laps around the room are stopping not only to talk to their guys but to talk to the women and give feedback and stay after practice. Literally the day before our last practice before Thanksgiving break, Jeff Buxton stayed an extra 30 minutes to work with one of our women. Like that's pretty impressive to
Yeah.
have a welcoming space and be included in decisions as far as like where do we want to go for international training this year, who are we looking at bringing over for guests. This person's popping in, I think they're going to do a practice with the guys, but we can see if we can get an extra practice with the women as well. So that inclusive, community and just like the ability to like bounce ideas off each other and share resources is tremendous, and it's a huge asset to each of our programs, but also just to New York City wrestling.
Yeah, it's really cool to watch. And you talked about Amit and Helen and everybody being in the room. And I remember at the clinic, I asked you, hey, do these people take any training courses? Because our Olympic and USA athletes they're just amazing people and interviewers. I absolutely love listening to Sarah Hildebrandt interview, talk about her cat and just just everything. And on her social media is fantastic. These are just genuine people, are just awesome people, aren't they? They're just
Yeah,
really,
we're fortunate in the sport to have like so many kind, good humans. I think you really have to work hard to try and find someone you don't like.
yeah, yeah,
I think if you spend some time though, they're pretty great people.
yeah. And to meet what a you get to work with her quite often, don't you? Being at the RTC and stuff is
Yeah, when she pops in, it's great. She usually pops in a few times during the year, less now that she's not with Valentine and with Sarah McMahon, and it's been actually really cool to like hear what's going on with her and Sarah, and like be able to watch another coaching relationship
uh-huh.
flourish and see what they're doing as well. But yeah, it's great when she's in. She wrestles with our women, wrestles with some of our guys, beats me up as well. It's nice to watch her beat up other people. So watching her at the Olympics,
Yeah.
tear up, I was like, wow, that makes me super proud and happy for her and excited, but also glad that that's not me getting snapped into the mat.
Yeah, well, and you'd mentioned the girls coming up now, and I say girls, women coming up now. What an amazing group that we had at the Olympics this year, but there's more coming behind them and stuff. So it's got to be really cool because those are probably some of maybe the developmental people that you started working with, I don't know, was 10 years ago,
Yeah, it's been a
somewhere in
minute,
there.
but Yeah, it's really cool to be able to like step back and see where each of them are, whether they're still in the sport, whether they're coaching, whether they're wrapping up their career, or just really breaking into that senior level. It's fortunate to like be able to see that spectrum of over a decade of time, really to like watch and see where everyone lands and goes. Uh, and so cool, like to think when I first started at USA Wrestling, they were closing the Olympic Training Center for the women's resident program at Northern Michigan, and they were just going to focus on the senior women and hone in there and just reinvented an entire new system of camps and clinics. International trips and like built something that didn't exist within USA Wrestling, but to see it like pay off in the Olympic success now, and then also to see like as more opportunities have been sanctioned or programs have been added, to see that like more and more clubs and high level coaches and just coaches in general are accepting and welcoming of those women, recognizing like the potential of that student athlete. And I think those kinds of things all together kind of worked synchronously to like it's a swell of amazing talent and skill. I'm really excited to see what happens. I'm definitely nervous to see what happens as well, because I think we somewhat benefited from delayed overinvestment in wrestling and specialization from like, they weren't specializing until high school or later in high school
Yeah.
to college. And now to have them specializing early, I'm hopeful that their bodies will hold up and that like the resilience and mental fortitude it takes to do something so monotonous and laborious every day withstands. But I think like if we can keep the sport fun, if we can make sure that the community is still really engaged and supportive with one another, that we could see some of our best wrestling yet. And that's saying a lot because we're doing pretty good right now.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. It is amazing to watch. I would definitely want to touch on this. You are the founder of an ever evolving story, and this is something that I'm lacking. I need to commit to taking this course. Can you talk a little bit about your coaching course and everything? Because this is something I think is I've did a little bit of looking into it. I don't research a lot. I kind of fly by the seat of my pants. So I want you to explain a little bit to us, and I promise I will be taking this. So go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. Well, thanks for bringing it up. Coaches education is definitely something that's like I love and I'm passionate about. I love learning, and I know like how important learning was, and those courses have been in my life as far as like my own trajectory. And I started Evolve really to like the word meant a lot to me. It's like we're constantly evolving. We're challenging the status quo, trying to break out of any boxes and put forth our best self, and recognizing that like the strongest traits do tend to survive, right? Like what are the things I need to like get to my next level here? And so I've done, a various set of like courses and clinics in person, virtually. This is like the first course that I kind of like put back and just put on the backside of my website for people to access at will. Um, and just have access to all the time. And so there's like 20 topics, 6 hours of content, anything from like recruiting student athletes to building a practice plan, changing the cues that you're using while teaching to make sure that you're boosting retention and skill acquisition, putting together plans to help your student athletes deal with competition anxiety, and just like all of those things. I think coaching requires us to wear so many hats, and we could take 10 different courses to learn one skill. But here's like a taste of some essential things to help you get by with your practice planning. Here's some things that you might need for your periodization plan. Let's give you some tools on like how do you help a first year wrestler pack a competition packing list. Just like the simple basic, but also some really powerful things. Like here's 3 things to do for an athlete struggling with nervousness before competition. So it kind of spans the spectrum and is a bit of a taste of everything. Mike Clayton, USA Wrestling's coaches education director, just added it as a suggested course on the silver level coaches. Again, just like here's a piece of a million different things. I think when I think of like the gold and the silver source courses, I think of like silver as like taste testing a lot of different information and figuring out what was most interesting to me, what things were like essential to my coaching philosophy and to the skills that I would want to bring to my team. And the gold was really like, how do you dig deep on that skill, think about the theory, research it, and apply it. And so it's kind of like a sampler to get into that next level.
Yeah, I'm actually looking. Jason and I have talked a lot about taking that, maybe doing it together and stuff, just because we bounce each other ideas off each other all the time. There's probably not a night that goes by. You talked about technique videos that I don't wake up to three. Oh, actually, I work nights, so he wakes up to three new videos, and then when at noon when I wake up, there's
Uh-huh.
three new videos and throw things across. And we always talk about things like that. And I love the just the philosophies and that you put out. Just and again, they're not new, but you've reworked them, you've evolved them, and now we can take those and evolve them to work for us too. And I hope
Yeah,
that
you
a
mentioned
lot, I
it
hope a lot
earlier,
of people,
right?
yeah,
We're all just like trying to learn and better ourselves, and like,
yeah,
what did I take from this person and reprocess and siphon, or repackage in a meaningful way that was meaningful to me, right? But whatever sticks, it's cool.
yeah. And I think one of the biggest things I've taken from you, and I think before we started, I think I talked about this, that wrestling is something we do, but it's not who we are. I mean, we're so many different things and things like that. So I think that's such an important thing. That's something that I struggled with out of college, and I was just again lower level NAI wrestler, but I'd always been from like a small age, second, third grade when I started wrestling. I always kind of was known as a wrestler, and that's my brother was a wrestler, and he's a wrestling coach. And actually, we are two of the three schools in our conference that have women's wrestling, and I coach with. So that's the only time I see my brother
That's cool.
is when we're coaching, and it's so much fun because we're busy. We're busy lives and stuff, but we get to have that little connection between girls wrestling and stuff. So that's really neat. But I after that last match that I had in college, yeah, it was NAI Nationals in Butte, Montana. I remember it to this day. I went up and I thanked my coach for giving me the opportunity, and I think I cried for a week straight because I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was anymore, and quite honestly, I kind of I know now it was depression and kind of went off the deep end. And I really try to that's something that I try to talk to athletes about is it's not that heavy, man. It's just a wrestling match. Don't put too much into it. It's I mean, obviously put the work in
Mhm.
and stuff like that, but
Yeah, but
that's such a
perspective
small it's
wise, it's
yeah,
just a
it's such a
match.
small part. Yeah, it's just a match. It's
Yeah.
such a small part of our lives. The team's important in that aspect and the relationships we build, but wrestling's not it's not that deep. We're out there just beating
Yeah,
each other up, man. So I gotta thank
100%
you
agree.
for I really gotta thank you for changing some of the ways I looked at things just in those few interactions we've had. So I mean it's really been cool evolving. And I'm going to take that course because I really want to do it. There's one more kind of serious topic I want to hit, and then I got
Yeah.
some fun ones that we want to talk about. The Japanese model. I'm guessing we study that quite a bit. What did I think I kind of understand the idea, but what do the Japanese do that we are not doing because they're amazing. It's like each one's I was at the World Cup a few years ago in Iowa City, and each one walking out was just a little bit bigger version of the last one. And you couldn't distinguish who was.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it was amazing to watch. So what's the Japanese model, and how do we recreate something, or maybe we shouldn't recreate it. Maybe we do
Yeah.
something different. But
I think like one huge advantage that they have on top of like a historic country based on martial arts and respect within martial arts, is like the proximity that they are to each other. For our best wrestlers to train together every day, that's not a commutable distance.
yeah,
So proximity wise, we're a little bit different issues. And then as far as like mixed martial arts, we weren't as accepting to like women in martial arts, whether it's been wrestling or taekwondo or anything, right? Like, so I think they have a history and culture of that. Starting from a young age, those athletes are working on motion, penetrating and moving through someone, recovering their hips, creating angles. Just it's all about like that position and repetition. I remember we took a group over to Japan for the Yoshida Cup, and I swear this kid was like 6, was like knee sliding, she would then like just stood up and had like her hips in and allowed her head to rise a little bit, but just constantly like had her head up, hips in the entire way across two wrestling mats, back and forth with her partner for like 15 minutes. Just one kid. I'm like, and there's thousands and thousands of these kids all doing that, you know? And so imagine the amazing technique. I think their model's pretty simplified as far as like how are they looking to score. Um, and just getting through the legs and running. And obviously, like that advances as they get to the older realms. But I think we spend so much time teaching details to our youth without really spending enough time talking about like positionally, I got to get my head up, hips in. Where do I need to be moving through those situations? Just repetitions over time. We teach too much instead of focusing and on that repetition. I think also like they spend a ton of time sparring and in shot recovery, and that's a huge piece, right? Like they go behind or to finish in that position. That's a huge area
Yeah.
um, of like a wrestling match. 90% of that freestyle match is on your feet, and so you're either the one shooting, you're the one being shot on. So can you stop that shot? Can you scramble through those situations? And I think they just do a great job discipline wise as far as holding position. Um, Controlling the attack hand, moving, faking, off balancing us, keeping distance, then crowding in and forcing us to create space again and restarting back at a spot that's disadvantaged to us. I think we wrestle pretty much better in ties, whereas they're wrestling really well from space. Um, and so it's a different style, but I think, yeah, we're closing the gap. The world is definitely catching on that Japan's got some good things. And I think that's due to the success of the Japanese men, because if when a woman succeeds, they just write it off of like, oh, it must have just been chance. But when a guy does, we're like, that's a system that's winning.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested to see what comes out of the extra eyes and attention to detail that's going to be coming and scrutinized on their programs. When I first started at USA Wrestling, they didn't allow USA Wrestling to bring athletes over, and so I'm wondering too if they're going to close up those borders again to not let us into the
Yeah.
training room. But it's a competitive world. We're closing the gap on them.
Yeah. No, they're fun to watch. Wow, they're amazing. So let's get into some fun questions just to end this interview. And it's they're you don't have nothing serious or anything like that. Living in New York City or in the general area, what do we do for fun? There's so much to do. I mean, to contrast, I live in a town of 600 people, no stoplights. We have two bars and about four churches.
Wow.
So so
Yeah, my wife and I are foodies, so we like to go out to eat. Comedy clubs. We're season ticket holders for the New York Liberty, so we watch a lot of basketball.
nice.
Um, yeah, a lot of wrestling, of course, but just hanging out with our friends. We have a really good friend group here, and there's lots of places to walk and explore, eat, listen to a podcast of the history of that neighborhood. Check it out. It's delicious and a fun way to experience the city.
Yeah, no, you mentioned foodie, and I am also. What's some of your favorites? What's some of the things you really like to eat, and especially
Yeah,
since you travel so much.
I love Asian food, bao buns, dumplings. I actually like asked my wife to make bao buns for Thanksgiving this year, so that was a shakeup to our Friendsgiving, but that's okay. Um, Ramen. I love Mexican food. We usually do like a cooking class each year, and we've been taking a lot of Indian classes. So some really good vegetarian dishes and delicious spices too within like that culture as well. So
And living on the coast there, I'm sure you probably like seafood also. I
I do. I can get down with some seafood. I'm
that's
typically hold out until we go to the Caribbean and then like load up on fish, but I definitely will order it if it looks good. I'm in.
yeah. Yeah, it's scary to have Iowa sushi. So, I try to do that when I travel to Florida a couple of times a year. So I
Uh-huh.
usually try to have it there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's probably
You feel
okay.
better about it closer to the coast
So,
for sure.
yeah, yeah. I always ask the girls if they'd rather vacation in the mountains or at the ocean, but I'm going to ask you, you've traveled a lot of the world. What's some of your favorite vacation places? I know you probably don't get a lot of time to spend, but I'm sure you get to see some stuff.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of wrestling gyms, a lot of saunas, a lot of hotels. Um, my wife and I love the beach. I particularly like love mountains. Yeah, so I think anytime we can have a meld of those things, um, like hiking on a volcanic island or like um, we also really like architecture, so hitting Europe and wandering around the streets and trying to get like a little bit of nature and hitting the parks that way. I think it really depends on what you're into, really, of like what mood you're in and where you would want to go. But some fun places. I love Budapest. I feel like that's one of my favorite cities. Terry and I spent like 2 weeks there, roaming around on bikes every day, just exploring the city while our women were getting ready for the Olympic qualifier. So they were tapering, and so it wasn't a lot of wrestling. It was mostly just stay out of the way um,
So
and let them
with your
perform. But
with your
go ahead.
travels, does your wife get to travel with you a little bit, or is it more? I mean,
Um,
she's probably in career also and things.
yeah,
So
she's got a career. Her career is definitely bustling. But yeah, if we can, we'll try and put something on the map. Like if I we went to Paris for the Olympics this year together. Uh, she's not going back to Paris with me next week, but she is jealous. So, I think when she can, she's willing to hop on some trips. She's kind of like the team mom for the team as well. So, it's nice to like when she can come and support them and go run errands because I am a staff of one as well to help out with those things. It's really nice.
oh, very nice. We're getting closer to Christmas, and that's all starting to hit. Do you have a favorite Christmas movie?
Probably Elf.
Oh my God, I love Elf.
What's yours?
I think Elf is also if it's not Elf, it's got to be the Elf or the Grinch, one of the two there.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
talking the live action Grinch, not
Uh-huh.
not the
Yeah, the old
original.
timey one. Yeah.
Yeah, no. So that's yeah, I would pick Elf too. I actually started watching Elf with my grandkids this weekend, so
Oh,
that was and I
that's
think they got
awesome.
it. They got involved with their phones, and then yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, they
those
missed out
those
on the humor. There's so much dry humor in that. It's so funny.
yes, yes. I am a huge shoe person, and wrestling shoes, I have, well, I tend to give them away because someone always comes in the room that needs them. But if you were going to pick the shoes, you got the opportunity, one year of eligibility left. What shoes would you buy?
This hurts because I'm really a Nike person, but I love my aggressors. I'll never step out of an Asics aggressor unless I'm forced to.
Really nice. That's one I haven't put on,
Really,
is
they're very
ASIC
stiff,
aggressors.
but I was built for comfort, not speed, so it's all
Gotcha. Yes.
good.
I think my favorite pair they don't even make anymore. So I'm gonna age myself. So I graduated in '89. So in 1988, I got a pair of they were all blue Dan Gable Ultras, the true split sole with the big white back on them, big puffy back.
Mhm,
Oh my God, I love those shoes. I wore those from my junior year of high school all the way through college. I would bounce back and forth between
mhm.
the red and silver. They were the Dan Gables at the time, but I think they changed them to Dave Schultz.
Nice.
Or
I
the
was gonna
E.
say that sounds like the Asics Schultz that they remade.
Yes, yeah, that's what I had. Those two pairs
Those
were
were
my
actually
favorite.
really comfy, so those are a good
Yes.
choice.
Yes, very good. Very much. Another kind of stepping back on the mat, you're going to have another national championship match. What's the music in your earbuds?
Yeah, probably something relaxing. Um, some sort of like meditative beat. I think like centering myself. I definitely was like more into hype music when I first was like competing and then recognizing that I was like over psyching myself up versus like relaxing. Yeah, I think like just turning that dial back down and deep reflective breathing and controlled would have been helpful for me.
A little bit more relaxed, more zen than screamo.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's like some beats that have like the right rhythm to
hmm
kind of like reset you mentally and like calm your vagus nerve and all that kind of stuff. So I've probably been hitting that.
Nice. What genre of music do you listen to otherwise?
Yeah, I'm eclectic, but the one that I turn on to really frustrate the athletes would be like 90s 2000s alternatives or like
Nice.
top 40 during that time as well. They get upset because I won't pay for the ad-free version of Spotify. And then it's music that they don't like. So
Very nice. Yes, I go back a little farther and I'll put on my hairband ballads, and the girls absolutely hate that,
Yeah.
but but it's fun. It's fun
Yeah,
for
it is
me.
fun.
Um, Simple one. What's your favorite color?
A dark green.
Dark green. That's a
What's
random
yours?
swatch. I'm a purple guy, and actually
Purple.
my wedding colors were purple and green,
Oh,
and it
nice.
kind of worked together even because my
Were
wife is
they
also
were they deep dark ones?
deep dark ones. Yes, my wife is
Yeah,
also a dark green person too.
awesome.
How long I did in this I didn't even have on my list, and I knew that. Um, how long have you been married now? Is this
We just celebrated a year. I had to think about
is
that.
it? Yeah, I had
Yeah, just a little bit over a year.
very good, very good. I was gonna tell. I think I might even mention it when we were at the clinic that I did weddings. I'm ordained minister and stuff, so I would have done that
Nice.
wedding for you, but
We might have had to call you in. We were in Maui
oh, I
during
would
the
have been
fire. Yeah,
happy. I would have been happy to come to Maui for that. Um, I this has been fantastic for me. I always give people an opportunity to have maybe a little free thought, whatever they want. Doesn't have to be profound, but coming from Emma Randall, we'll all listen and it will be profound, I'm sure. So if you want to go ahead and give us a final thought for tonight.
yeah. I think first I want to thank you for having me on. It's been really fun catching up with you, Troy. I appreciate
Thank
everything
you.
that you're doing for the sport. I think like we're all just like one one small piece of the cog that's kind of churning this sport and developing it and it's exploding right now and truly reaching its potential and hopefully rising what we thought we were capable of even doing. So I guess my thought is that just to remember our space, and we're doing great stuff, but also we still got to be pulling more people in. We need to continue to grow the pie and have those welcome arms and make sure that the people that are here know that they're appreciated and supported and rely on that community and encourage that community to continue to thrive. Whether we're inviting wrestlers, coaches, officials, peers, whatever, into the sport, but um, we've got a long way to go and grow, and we can't do it alone. So I appreciate what you're doing, and I'm excited to see the sport continue to grow and check back and see what's changed, in the near future.
Yeah. Well, thank you very, very much for doing this. Like I said, I started this about a month and a half ago, and it's really enjoyable to catch up. A lot of times, it's girls I've coached in the past, whether it's been on a national team or I haven't even had an interview with any of the girls I coach except for the very first one, Keegan, who I don't know if I showed the picture. Well, we're gonna pop that up. I
Oh,
don't know if you can see that. You see, you
that's
haven't
awesome.
changed. You haven't changed one bit. You see, I got a lot of gray from when that was that very first clinic down in Lincoln. So, Keegan and I talk about that often too. That was one of those cool events. But I'm gonna go ahead and hit the stop button on the record. Stick around for just a minute,
Awesome.
and I'll talk to you. So.